let me work out how to articulate this. I'm thinking about your comment, Richard, on your applying sanctions to the way that people think doesn't make them think differently, which sort of got me thinking about, you know, the world, how the world would be if we hadn't have applied sanctions in certain areas, and sort of the value of quotas in the boardroom setting. And that harked back to a comment I've heard Nicola Mendelsohn make about quotas, you know, her position on quotas having changed. So there was a time we thought, well, quotas, not a good idea. Now, knowing that from the Davis report, that if we continue at this pace, it's going to take 70 years for there to be equality at boardroom level in this country, maybe we should apply quotas. And if the result of that is that there are some men, there are some women who are in senior positions who are shit at their jobs, then that's a price worth paying, because frankly there's lots of men in senior positions who are shit at their jobs. So yeah, more on quotas. I think there's more to be said there.
I'd be interested in throwing that question back to you. I think Scilla mentioned quotas. I mean, how do you feel being hired to make up a quota rather than being hired for who you are? I mean,
I think obviously if you were to apply quotas tomorrow, then that may be what would happen. But if we're looking longer term, and if we think about the earlier point on screening people as you move people through their careers, so that the earlier idea of kind of perhaps putting women with certain managers versus men with certain managers. So if you have a longer term objective of where quotas create boardroom equality, then that would, I think, it would influence the way that you know, human resources departments and senior leadership people push people through, you know, or help people in their careers. So I think quotas long term need to be in place, really.
Any other views from the panel?
It is a very interesting debate, and I know that you're.
We talked about it. Gail and I did something, didn't we? And who was it? Harriet Harman. So Harriet was saying,
she was all for them.
I think you should have them. I think you should have them, and it will just solve this problem straight away. You know, it will be done instantly. And you know, look at Sweden. Look at da. And of course, my ego, I have one, went, oh God, that man. You know, I would feel that to not do something on your merit is quite a difficult thing to take. So I think that's so. Do you allow that to get in the way of something that within a generation will change the system? And do I look for more females? I probably do, in all honesty. Do I hire on merit? Yes, I do. But do I have more of an eye open to? I do, but there's not one of the women that I've hired because they're a woman. I've just hired because they're very good. But I have a feeling I would be slightly more alive to them being female, because I would like to have more. So maybe there is a sort of maybe more of an organic way of doing it.
But I think there's the implication that if you force quotas, then you're forcing people to hire people who can't be hired by their merit. It's not that. You're just looking harder for them. So they're all out. We know they're all out there. All these talented, capable women are out there, but male-dominated boards aren't looking for them. So if you, and collectively we're not looking for them, men, women, we're just, so if they're there and you're forced to find them, then you're going to end up with quality at board level. It's just the process of finding them may take a little longer.
I think that was the point that was made at the Women of the World conference. Andrew Cracknell, who's a really well-known, experienced creative director, he would never have said he agreed with quotas back in the day when he was our creative director, and he's all for them now, because he agrees with what you just said, that all the talent, if you are against quotas, then you're actually saying, well, if we hire women, they're going to be shit. Yeah. And actually, the talented women are out there, so what's wrong with saying you have to have a few more? That's because that's all it is, really, in the end. It's forcing you to look more carefully at women. And there are lots of instances where, you know, the male replication of male culture, because it is a natural thing, as Richard said, it's natural to want to hire in your own image because it's been successful, you have a successful culture. It's very difficult to see outside that. So I believe there is a question for some sort of quotas to be
And
honest.
businesses should know that they
McKinsey
make
report.
more money, they're more successful when there's better equality at board level. That's a fact. So it's a win-win.
So it is win-win, and I think that people are very stubbornly against it because there is this natural assumption, which again is cultural, that women aren't going to be as good as men, and that's the underlying thing we have to get over, because there is still that assumption, oh, quotas for women, oh, we're going to hire shit ones. Not true. Any other questions?
Hi there, Caroline from Elvis. I've just got a question about flexible working hours. It was something which was touched on in the last session, and I think somebody ended up saying the jury's still out whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, the way to go, not the way to go. And Richard kind of touched on it when he said, quite interestingly, that middle management seemed to have some sort of issues around it. Certainly within my agency, there's not much experience of flexible hours and at previous agencies I've worked at. So I was just wondering if you've got any thoughts either to further what Richard spoke about or personal experience about how it can and cannot work for different people within the agency, because sometimes it's the people who are almost left behind to pick up what other people can't do because they're working more flexible hours that has a wider impact upon the agency culture.
Shall I dive in then?
Yeah.
Or do you-
Well,
no, it's
I think there is I think it's up to the culture to make it okay not to be there,
yeah.
because there is, who knows what you're doing, you know. And I think I know I do a lot of my work at midnight when I've got home, put my son to bed, and then do work. You know, that's what I do, and that's being flexible. And I think I think all it is the culture of feeling that people have to be there. And I think beyond that, you know what I mean? And I think that's the bit we can do a lot about. And I thought Geraldine I loved all those things about, you know, I can see it as people go to the back lift to go out, you know, people go, oh, enjoy, you know, half day.
Yeah.
And I just go, oh, God, I can't believe it. So, and you know, luckily in a little bit of what, you know, I think the point of our industry is we are a service business. We are always there for someone else, and we are on demand. So there are some things that the out of control bit is that we're there to service people, but that does ultimately, so the inflexibility comes there, but it doesn't mean there's a rigid 9-to-5 behaviour.
No.
So I think
I think it was Roisin Donnelly who said who was obviously talking from a client perspective, that it's sometimes easier to make it work on the client side than potentially the agency side. But she'd also trialled job sharing quite extensively and said it didn't work, but that part-time work did. And perhaps it was easier because of the commute. You often live near client organisations, and we often have commutes into city centres and so on. So therefore, as Kate said, it is about helping people to take control of their time. If they have to do outside hours, giving them the means to do that, but also giving them the flexibility to work around that and fit their lives around that. We've got part-timers working at the agency, and people they don't compromise other people's roles or put more pressure on other people. They make their role work within that time, and they make other people quite efficient, actually, because they have to work within that time as well. So we've never found it a problem. It's not happening enough, but I think people are afraid to ask for it as well and negotiate it. And you know, we should create a culture where you don't feel afraid to ask.
it's a funny business, isn't it? We were talking about this. I think, you know, I think one of the bigger issues is ageism rather than, you know, sexism. Because I think actually if you look at, we are an industry that has built itself on the culture of 20-somethings who don't necessarily have other lives and families, and they give it their all. And I know I did, and all the people in the agency that are young do that. And then there's an expectation that carries on. And it can't, and suddenly there's this dramatic sort of sense that, what, you have another life, you have other things to do. And I think there's a stark contrast as a sort of this gap of the 20-somethings that are there 24/7, never taking holidays, working, to then, in contrast, someone who then will go home to pick up their children or do something. There seems to be that it's made more obvious because of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the pitfalls of the job share, part-time, you know, flexible working, is when the company doesn't really fully understand what it's asking someone to do, and they finish up working normal hours anyway, because their sense of responsibility or their conscientiousness, that they're actually doing a full-time job whilst being paid for a part-time job and attempting to do the other things that are in their life at the same time. The company's really got to get its head around what it's really asking.
And if I could just add, I think the point that was being made was that until it becomes something that both men and women do, it will still be perceived to be a women's problem, which can be, in some instances, if you haven't got the right company culture, detrimental, because it will still be seen as an issue. So the culture needs to shift to be more accepting that people want to work flexibly, not just women. Anyway, we have time for one more question. Lady there with blonde hair.
Hi, Faith from Addiction. We talked earlier a bit about how when women came back from maternity leave, it was good for managers to take risks on them. But sort of from my point of view, I've not hit that stage yet. How can my behaviours maybe encourage my managers to take risks and on me with projects and jobs? And likewise, how can I encourage my managers to upmanage them in those behaviours and encourage them to look at me that way?
I think when your manager is a man, he has no clue what you're going through. And I think men, well, my friends from Total Media can check me on this. I think there's a tendency as a man attempting to deal with a woman coming back from maternity to stand way back, to just be really very careful about the language that you use, about what you're asking someone to do, And so I might very much give you a job that doesn't involve overseas travel because I think I'm helping you, not putting you in a difficult position. Now that may be the kind of, somebody mentioned this earlier, that may be the best job I have to offer because it's going to put you in a better place far more quickly. But in attempting to kind of aim off from this kind of condition that I have never and never will understand, so I think from my perspective, there's a big onus on you to make it very clear what you're up for. And to not assume that I'm going to be particularly smart about this.
And if you don't feel you've got a sponsor within the organisation, perhaps recruit one for yourself as well. Quite overtly, someone you think that that you're inspired by, and you to talk to about this. Yeah.
And I think that, going back to what Geraldine was saying, it would be really good to get men involved in this so that Richard doesn't have to say, I haven't got a clue what you're going through, because we need to involve men so that they do understand. And Geraldine's coaching is testament to that men can get to grips with it. It's not that much of a leap from being a mum and a dad. It's quite similar. They're our children. Anyway, I think we are now going to move on. So thank you, panel, if you'd like to take your seats again.